Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be with you in Athens. I'm sitting here in Brussels. Very sorry that I'm not with you, but what I would like to do with you is to have 10 or 15 minutes talk about what recent EU regulation brings for insurance intermediaries, but from the perspective of the customer. Indeed, the customer is our end objective for our sector. The customer is our client. And over the last couple of years, there has been a wave of new regulation with the objective to protect consumers. This regulation is coming from European and national initiatives. At European level, we have seen various new rules coming from a variety of directives and regulations. And of course, all these new rules have the financial crisis as a background. Politicians in Europe have said, we do not want this financial crisis anymore, so we are going to develop new regulation that brings stricter rules in the financial services sector. At the same time, the European politicians, but also the national governments, set up new supervisory authorities in our sector. New supervisory authorities with new powers and new objectives. What we are going to deal with this afternoon more in detail is the IDD, the Insurance Distribution Directive. The Insurance Distribution Directive is the successor of the IMD, the Insurance Mediation Directive, and the Insurance Mediation Directive is in fact the source of your national insurance intermediation regulation, also in Greece, but also in all the other national markets in the European Union. The new IDD, so the new rules, will come into force at national level, will be implemented at national level by 2018, early 2018. But the directive is ready and we know what is in there. And as I said, we will look at it from a consumer perspective in order to understand what it brings for us also, because if we have a good regulation, we can also better convince our customers to have trust in us. Now, of course, the other side is that we may be overburdened by administrative obligations, liability, responsibilities, and so on. But we believe that at the level 1 of the IDD, so what is in the directive, is something that the sector can live with. We have to be careful, however, that in the implementation process, there is no, let's say, as they call it, gold plating, yeah, and that they would go over the level 1, because then indeed it would become an administrative burden, an unnecessary administrative burden. So let's look what is already in the IDD in terms of consumer protection. Well, in terms of consumer protection, the IDD is covering now a much wider scope than the IMD. Indeed, all distribution channels, also direct writers, and also digital systems of distribution, whatever you may have in mind and whatever may come in the near future, is in principle covered under the IDD. There are only very few exceptions, and these exceptions can still be, let's say, covered also at national level. The IDD requires from every intermediary and every distributor to manage conflicts of interest between the intermediary and the client. This includes, for example, that you also have to explain to your client from what perspective you are talking to him, and this on a case-by-case basis. The IDD brings also more transparency. More transparency, as I already said, about your status, who you are, from what perspective you are sitting around the table with your client, rather from a sales perspective, an advice perspective, or whether or not you are working on a fee or a commission basis. Every information that you provide to your customer must be fair, clear, and cannot be misleading. Now, this is also applicable to direct writers and other forms of distribution. So it's, I believe, a concept we can live with, that information must be fair, clear, and not misleading. This is something that we are having as a concept since always in the intermediation sector. As I said, the customers will receive more and more clear information about the relationship that you have with the insurers. There will be also transparency about the nature of the remuneration. So we are not talking about the amounts here, especially not in the non-life sector. We're talking about the nature of the remuneration. And then there will be more product transparency. Product transparency, in practice, this will be translated into a product information document, which will be a 2 or 3 page document for non-life insurances. There is also a key ID, a key information document in the life with investment element sector. But for the non-life sector, for every car insurance, for every household insurance, there will be a 2 or 3 page document that will describe the basic characteristics of that product. These documents will be produced by the manufacturer, who in principle is the insurer, and the intermediary will make sure that it is handed over to the customer. There is always, as in the IMD, the demands and needs test. You must know that there was a discussion about an obligation to have an advice in the IDD. We believe that that was not a good idea because advice has various meanings in various member states and can have different consequences. But we believe that the demands and needs test is a very good system to make sure that a client is not sold something that he doesn't really need or that he doesn't want. And also that is part of our professionalism of the intermediaries, is to make sure that clients have what they need, what they want, but nothing more and nothing less. Then there are a couple of organizational requirements. So besides the aspect of basic training requirements, which are already in place since the IMD, we now have a continuing professional training requirement, obligation, which is 15 hours per year. But we were able to discuss with the European legislators that that should be a practical course. So perhaps conferences, courses conferences can count perhaps for a few hours of training. Then specialists in marine should, in our opinion, not have to follow 10 hours of car insurance lessons, so that kind of thing. So it can be tailor-made. That must be worked out at national level, but I'm certain that your national association, members of BIPAR, are already working on the practical organization of these courses. Then there are some financial capacity requirements which haven't changed a lot. There is the PI cover requirement. So with all these rules in place, we believe that consumers can really be certain that if they buy insurance with an insurance intermediary, that they are well served. So there are also new cross-selling rules, and for example, it will not be possible anymore just like that to sell an insurance with a car, or at least there will be the possibility to buy that insurance somewhere else. That are a couple of rules that need to be checked against other regulations. So it's a complex framework where also at national level it needs some attention in the phase of implementation. So the cross-selling practices. And then there is a completely new aspect that is coming from the MiFID world, and this is about product governance. Product governance means that the one who is developing the product has to identify a target market for the product. And then, so the insurer most of the time, must also identify the optimal distribution network. So here we have to be careful, of course, because this can have some consequences in the future. On the other hand, if we work well together with insurers to find out for what product, what channel is the best one, then I think we can find very good combinations there. And of course, this product governance concept goes much further than that. For the manufacturer, there are a couple of other obligations, but we are still working, or at least the European institutions are still working on a level 2, on a more detailed set of guidance and rules in this respect. And we are working with these European institutions now to find a practical, reasonable, and not too burdensome system. But we have nothing against, I believe, the principle that a product, an insurance product that is put in the market is at the start a basic good product with a target market. In case of buying across the border, there are new rules. So when you are doing cross-border business, as of 2018, the supervisory authorities from home and host member state will have some new powers. But that is something we will inform you about in due time in more detail. And then for EBIPs, and EBIPs, you see Europe likes these acronyms. So the EBIPs is for insurance-based investment products. There are some extra rules. They are more in line with the investment rules of MiFID II. Yeah? And so above the non-life applicable rules, there are some extra rules for the insurance-based investment products. Here again, the conflicts of interest management is stricter. The PRIPS, as I already said, for EBIPs there will be the KID, so there will be a key information document, comparable to the PID that I already talked to you about, product information document for the non-life. There will be a key ID, a key information document for the investment insurance products. Also there is a level 2, as we call it, legislation or regulation that is under preparation, and we still have to see the details of that. We hope that these details will remain reasonable and remain in line with the level 1, and then of course comes the national implementation. Some sections of the KID, it's about costs, it's about risk, when we are talking about investments, and it's about guarantees. So, in a nutshell, this is what is going to change. As I said at the start, we believe that the level 1 text, so the directive, is bringing concepts we can live with. But as I said, we will be very careful for the national implementation. We must be very careful in the phase of the national implementation, and we must be very careful for the level 2 that these rules or these new levels of regulation do not bring administrative burden without further interest for the customer. What we will see for intermediaries is that processes will be formalized and supervision will become stricter. So from, let's say, 2018 on, the supervisor will not only intervene when he believes that something is going wrong. No, the supervisor will come to your office, will check if the form is okay. So did you do the demands and needs test? Is it documented? Do you have a handbook for the management of conflicts of interest for the people in your office? Do you have your agreements with your insurers? So you can perhaps already start documenting all that, because that will be the new audit-style supervision of the future, and we have to be prepared for that. And I believe it is important to prepare for that, because also in the directive, the sanctions are becoming much heavier. So we will be watched. We can ask ourselves whether all this is proportional, whether all this is reasonable, and whether the consumer wants all this. Well, we, as I said, believe that the level 1 concepts are absolutely acceptable. The concepts, the principles, it's now up to the national implementation to make sure that all these rules become in practice indeed proportional, reasonable, and useful also in terms of consumer protection. And with this, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are questions, I think there is time, but I'm not so certain about that. But in any event, I wish you some more good time at your conference in Athens, and I'm very pleased that I was with you. Thank you.